Hello, my name is Attorney Van Smith, Managing Partner here at Smith Strong, and today I'm joined by Mark Tubbs. Mark is the author of Conquering the Cost of Nursing Home Care, a How-To Guide. Mark, it's good to be with you.
Good to be with you, Van. Appreciate the time today.
And it's a pleasure to be with you. I've invited Mark here for our watchers and listeners at home because Mark spent a lifetime, a career in the elder care and nursing home care industry. And after he retired, he did us all a big favor. He wrote a book on how to essentially select or pick and then pay for a nursing home. And a lot of his career was spent here in Virginia. And so it's of particular note and importance for us as Virginians to understand the knowledge he has. Mark, it's good to be with you.
Well, thank you again.
So what was your goal of writing this book and who are you trying to help?
The main thing that we wanted to do was to help those who are at a point in their lives where they're having to select a nursing home facility for either themselves or a loved one. That process can be very daunting, very complex, and a very difficult challenge, not just from a site selection perspective, but beyond that, it's an emotional decision that affects the resident as well as the family members, because most family members don't like giving up loss of control to someone else. So we tried to write this book to give some guidance to individuals, both from a perspective of selecting a facility and then how to pay for that loved one's care, because that is a very, very expensive proposition. And frankly, there's no one easy, quick solution, and it requires a lot of forethought and planning.
And so when Mark and I spoke on the phone earlier this month in preparation for today's interview, he gave a lot of practical tips of how everyday folks like you and I can select a facility for maybe ourselves or a loved one. So give us some of those practice pointers, how to select a facility.
When I was working managing facilities, the first thing that was drilled into my head was, what does the facility look like from the parking lot view? Because typically the view from the parking lot is reflective of the care that's on the inside. So you want to make sure the grounds are well maintained, the bushes are trimmed, parking lot is paved, lines are striped, that sort of thing, just the general appearance of the building. Another thing you want to be absolutely certain to do is go in and take a tour of the facility you're considering. Every facility has an admissions director, and the first thing I would do would be to seek out the admissions director and ask them to take you on a tour. While you're doing the tour, notice things like floors. We had linoleum floors, and our deal was we wanted the floors to look like glass, so that if you look down at the floor, you could see your reflection in the floor. We wanted them to be that polished. The other thing that we wanted to focus on was smells. Our buildings, the company that I worked for, did not allow us to use deodorizers because all that does is hide a smell. So the best thing you can do is use your nose, and generally speaking, if you detect odors, that can be an indication of poor quality care. You want to check for the last inspections by the state health department and see what the grade level was. They grade A to G, A being the least number of deficiencies, G being you actually caused harm to somebody, which obviously would be a concern. And then you would want to look at the staffing ratios. We want to do a staffing ratio of at least 3 nursing hours per patient per day. I know that doesn't sound like much, but the industry standard is about 3. Anything above 3 is excellent. You also want to make sure that they have RN staffing on both Saturdays and Sundays, because that is a requirement of the federal government. It's an indication, again, of level of care. You want to sit down with the activities director, because every facility is required to have what is called an activities board. And that lays out the activities for your loved one who's there. You want to make sure that your loved one is not just sitting in a room unattended all day, because that's not good for either their mental or physical well-being. One other thing you want to be cognizant of is what what accommodations do they have for medical directors, making sure that your patients are seen on a frequent basis. And also, if there's an emergent need, they are seen within a reasonable time frame, usually same day, certainly no less than 24 hours. And I think, those are the main things that I would be looking for: curb appeal, staffing, inspection reports, and medical directorship, and also activity. Activities are very, very important, because one of the things we tried to do was to make sure that our residents were not warehoused in their rooms, that they got out. The other thing I would do is ask for a copy of the residents' rights, because each facility is supposed to have a residents' rights handbook. And you need to take a look at that, make sure that you know what those rights of those residents are. You need to check about care plans. When do they have care plans? Because there's a frequency that is required by federal government for individuals to have care plans with the staff, which a care plan is basically a measure of their progress. Every person that goes into a facility, you develop a specialized plan, and it lays out goals that you're trying to accomplish with that individual. And you want to make sure, what is the communication mechanism between your loved one, the staff, and you, because you want to make sure you get contacted in the event there's a fall. Let's say, for example, if there's a fall, or if somebody has an acute illness and has to be sent out to the hospital, you need to make sure you get notified of those things. And those are some discussions that we should have, or you should have, with anybody as you're going into a facility.
It's amazing to me, as I read your book, Mark, Conquering the Cost of Nursing Home Care, a how-to guide, of the common sense approach that sometimes, because this seems like a totally new practice area, that we say, well, surely I need to disregard a lot of my common sense, sight, visual, smell, activities, ratios, and just sort of trust the expert in the room that has the white coat or the name badge. And what you're saying is, don't throw out of the window your own common sense and gut instincts on the parking lot, even of the flower beds as you walk in, of the smells that greet you, of the cleanliness of the floors. Really keep those in the front of your mind, and don't just push those away and think, well, surely they've got themselves organized.
And that is absolutely true, Van. In fact, one of the points we make in the book, it's called Trust Your Gut. And so, if it smells bad, it probably is bad. If it smells good, it probably is good. And you can make a lot of informed decisions just using your senses. And that is critical. Use your eyes. We used to talk about corners, cracks, and crevices, and that is, how do the floors look? Are they around the door frames? Are there dust bunnies around the door frames? Are there dust bunnies up against the tile in the hallways, in the rooms? Are the rooms neat, organized, and tidy, or are they all disheveled? So these are just common sense things that we all need to pay attention to, because, as I said earlier, the way a facility looks is indicative of the care that gets provided.
That's amazing, because it's so simple and yet so obvious that it could escape us. I also love your point of the 3-to-1 ratio. I didn't know about that before.
That, there had been a lot of effort, at least in the company that I worked for, to get to that level. And it's very challenging to do, because we have such a hard time these days in recruiting and retaining staff, principally because of our hourly rates. Now, we've seen the pay rates increase dramatically since I retired a few years ago, but it was very, very challenging, especially during the time of COVID, because obviously a lot of nurses and CNAs did not want to come into a building that had COVID. And I'm thankful to say that I did work in a couple of buildings that had COVID, but we were able to isolate those individuals and disinfect our facilities and get it out of the building very quickly.
Are there public-facing ratings, say like a restaurant with a sanitation grade, that the public could go to see their score for incidents or score for issues?
That's a great question. There's a couple of places you can go. CMS has a website, and you can go. It's called Nursing Home Compare, And you can go to that and you can see all the ratings for all of the nursing homes. You can do it geographically, individually, just whatever data you want. You can segment it by that factor that you're looking for. But in addition to that, every facility is required to have their inspection data from the current year plus the previous year. And it lists every single violation. It lists the level of severity. It gives you an overall rating of the facility. And contained in that, usually it's a notebook, contained in that notebook is the facility's plan of correction and whether it was accepted or not. If it was accepted, then you can rest assured that the facility is complying with those items that are in that notebook.
Now let's turn now to paying for care. What tips do you have in that same common sense manner that you brought to this book for paying for care, which is becoming ever more expensive?
Well, I tell you, that's one of the reasons that we wanted to write this book, was to give people sort of some practical ideas. There's no one easy answer, because I will tell you that the cost is very, very expensive. The facility that I worked for, when I left, the monthly cost was $14,000 a year. So if you multiply that, you can multiply it by 12 months and you can come up with a pretty hefty number. The other thing to consider is most of the facilities, including the ones I worked at, required a 1-month deposit, like moving into an apartment, and then 1 month in advance. So at the outset, you're going to be hit in that facility with a $28,000 cost. And I don't know how many people have $28,000 sitting around idle in a checking account that they can apply to this first month. So there's a couple of different ways to approach it. First, obviously, you can have private money, but you'd have to have a whole lot of it to stretch it out for a long period of time with that expense. You could have a long-term care insurance, which I have, and there's some very innovative and creative policies out there. In fact, I found one the other day that you pay your premium, and if you don't use it after a certain point, then they'll refund you the premium that you've paid, which is a very creative way to do it. And all that speaks to having a good financial advisor and a good elder care lawyer to help you navigate through all of this. The next way is really a Medicaid option. And the thing about Medicaid is only available to those individuals that have less than $2,000 in assets. That includes stocks, bonds, savings. So essentially what you have to do is void yourself of any liquid assets and then make an application. Usually it takes anywhere from about 60 days for Medicaid to approve your application, and they'll request a bunch of information, and you may actually have to do another one or two more submittals just to make sure they have everything they need. And what happens with Medicaid is they will backdate your eligibility to the date that you originally applied. So if you have to come up with money out of pocket on the front end, you'll get it back on the back end. Now, the way Medicaid works is the facility that I managed, the last one I managed, it was $14,000 a month. So hypothetically, let's say you had a pension of, $2,000 a month, just hypothetically. So what Medicaid would do would take that $14,000, subtract $2,000, which would mean you'd have a patient pay liability of $12,000 a month. And if you qualify for Medicaid, Medicaid would pay that remaining $12,000 balance every month.
Wow. That's amazing. And as I've explained to Mark, we also, as estate planning and elder law attorneys, can assist clients and their loved ones with navigating these challenges and pointing them to resources, facilities, and places to help them select and then fund or pay for the right facility for their family member. And it's our joy and privilege to surround family as they navigate these difficult days in the elder years. Mark, any final points that you want to make as we draw it to a close about your amazing book that I encourage people to get, Conquering the Cost of Nursing Home Care? And what was that website for the comparison tool again?
CMS Compare.
Got it.
Nursing Home Compare. but it's a CMS website. So it's Nursing Home Compare.
And CMS is a
Center for Medicaid and Medicare Services, which is a federal agency that tracks all this stuff and sets rules and regulations with respect to the operation of nursing homes.
I see. So the federal program Medicaid maintains the CMS website.
Correct.
That has a nursing home comparison tool.
Correct.
Wonderful.
Absolutely.
And takeaway points from your book, which I felt was just so straightforward, easy. It wasn't esoteric. It's not just for industry insiders. It's for everyday people to learn how to pick and pay for care.
I think the main takeaways, I would say, it is intended to be a practical guide. It's not an end-all, be-all answer to anything. It just offers practical considerations so that you can make an informed decision. I think that's the main thing. And I think the other thing is in the book we talk about, it is you trust your gut. If you don't feel comfortable in the facility, then don't place your loved one there. I would also say maintain open line of communication with whoever the administrator is. That's really important. I've been made aware of administrators who don't return phone calls. My policy was, if you leave me a voicemail, I'll return your message within 24 hours. That's just good business practice.
You know, it's so interesting to me. You know, I've attended a few TED Talks where people discuss clean windows and safer communities versus broken windows, unsafe communities. And it's sort of that same principle for city management as it is for nursing home care management. And that is, the cleaner the place, the more attention to detail you see, and even the little nooks and crannies, as you called it.
That's right.
The more likely they are to be caring for your loved one in the way you truly want for your family.
And man, that's really what it's all about. What level of care do they provide for your loved one? And the last thing I'd leave you with is, you asked about, how do you get this information? And I'll just reemphasize the point that every facility is required to have their most current state inspection and their last state inspection in a notebook, and it's generally in the lobby. And that would be another place I would start. I'd seek out that notebook and I would just thumb through it while I was waiting for the admissions director.
Well, I want to tell you, I'm approached all the time by people with books and information that they're seeking to spread the word on. But this one stopped me in my tracks. I'm adding it to my Van's recommended reading page on the website. I think that much of it. It's a practical, no-nonsense guide. Trust your instincts and seek out good advisors. Mark Tubbs, thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it very much, man. Thank you.